Today we gotta talk about Manny Ellis. Manny Ellis was the George Floyd that many people have forgotten about. Tacoma police officers unalived this man. Tacoma police officers essentially did the modern day lynching of Manny Ellis. This man lost his life for no reason in a violent police encounter, and Manny Ellis is no longer with us. The three officers who were put on trial were acquitted. Jury clears 3 Tacoma police officers of all charges in 2020 unaliving of Manny Ellis. Manuel Manny Ellis, who's a black man, was unalived in 2020 by Tacoma police officers. This is breaking news. It just happened. It was just announced. And I must tell you, it is not shocking. It wasn't shocking that Manny Ellis was harmed by police officers, nor was it shocking that the police officers were acquitted. Because as our brother Childish Gambino, or as you might know him as Donald Glover, would say, this is America. The jury acquitted Christopher Burbank, 38, and Matthew Collins, 40, of second-degree unaliving and manslaughter charges. The jury also acquitted Timothy Rankin of all charges. All 3 men had pleaded not guilty. Lawyers for the 3 police officers told the jury last week that Ellis's untimely passing was a result of drug use, not excessive force that included officers choking and shocking him and holding him face down. It was similar and reminiscent of George Floyd, essentially. It was reminiscent of what happened to George Floyd. That's what happened here. The long and short of it is, this is reminiscent of George Floyd, and this is reminiscent of the black condition. The thing that we as black Americans have been speaking about when it comes to U.S. law enforcement for centuries now. We understand what their purpose is, and we understand what the end result is every single time when it comes to U.S. law enforcement. Don't believe me? These so-called blue states or so-called ally states, oh, we're your allies, guys. We are for you. Freaking Black Lives Matter. And all these other things, lives matter, as they co-opt black movements, so-called allies, right? They claim to be your allies. They claim to want reform with the police, right? That's the claim. The problem with that claim is that when you look at places like Washington State, blue state, New York, blue state, California, blue state, Illinois, blue state, do you know what you're noticing? The police are not only not better. In the case of the LAPD, Tacoma Police Office, the Tacoma Police Department in Washington State, the case of the Pittsburgh and Antioch police departments in California. You have the Philadelphia Police Department. You got so many of these northern states and these blue states who have officers who do stuff like this, who take the lives of innocent black people left and right. And you see this happening all across the country. And yet you have these blue states who sit back and pretend like, oh, we're better than red states. Why? Because I put Black Lives Matter on my Facebook profile one time. This is why people who live in blue states believe like they are somehow better. Right? Right? So they tried to blame Manny Ellis for what happened to him. They tried this same ploy with George Floyd. It didn't work there, but it worked here. They blamed drug use on this man no longer living. He had been alive this whole time. Right? Even if he had somehow used drugs, right? And I'm not even sure I completely believe that, because I haven't confirmed that yet. But here's what I do know. He had been alive all the way up until that point doing the same drugs, right? But all of a sudden he encounters Tacoma police officers, and that's when he goes up to the upper room. And a jury thought that was reasonable. See, that also shows you it's not just the police, the racist police officers, the freaking race soldiers. It's the so-called average blue state citizen who claims to not be racist, who claims to not be, a virulent anti-black racist. But let me remind you of something, right? There was a sheriff in Washington State. His name was Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer. Ed Troyer was on trial for lying on a black newspaper carrier. It was proven he lied on a black newspaper carrier. The black man was named Cedric Altheimer. I know this story off the top of my head. Cedric Altheimer said that Ed Troyer was following him when Ed Troyer was off duty when Cedric Altheimer was delivering newspapers. Ed Troyer claimed that Cedric Altheimer threatened to unalive him. That's what he told Tacoma police. Tacoma police showed up, found no evidence of it, and then later on, Troyer would be criminally charged. And a jury acquitted Troyer of making a false report. A jury acquitted Troyer in the same state and not that far from the same place, because the Tacoma Police Department is the one that responded to that incident. So what that's showing you is a very interesting pattern. Also, one of the officers who showed up on the scene of the night that Manny Ellis was encountered, that Manny Ellis encountered Tacoma police officers. One of the law enforcement officers who actually showed up was a Pierce County Sheriff's deputy, and Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer didn't even mention that until the family found out and mentioned it. So from the very beginning, this case was tainted. And yet, for some reason, the jury found them not guilty. That same jury lives right there in that same area. Do you think that they get these kind of police officers who do these kind of things to black people and acquit a sheriff who's clearly a liar, who lied on a black man, and then acquit 3 officers who unalived a black man? Do you think that's all an accident? I want to remind you, the state that's directly next to Washington State, that'd be Oregon. Or shares a border with Washington State. Oregon banned black people at one point. And Oregon has more sundown towns than a lot of red states. Same with Washington State. But a lot of people who live in Oregon and Washington State and in the Pacific Northwest and in these northern blue states, they love to pretend like there's no racism. That's clearly a lie. I've been living here for a little minute. I came from the deep South, South Carolina. 40% of the slaves who came in through the port of Charleston was 40% was estimated to be 40% of the slaves who came in through Africa total. The freaking port of Charleston was that important. So I came from that state. And if I tell you that there's racism all over Washington State, Oregon, Montana, good God, Idaho, and all these other so-called northern states, that's what it is, son. So what happened here to Manny Ellis and the acquittal of these race soldiers, it is not only not shocking, every black person living in Washington State, especially in Tacoma, they will tell you they weren't shocked after they watched Ed Troyer walk doggone free. They weren't shocked ever since that. They weren't shocked ever since that. Ellis, who repeatedly told officers, "Can't breathe, sir," passed away on March 3rd, 2020, nearly 3 months before George Floyd's unaliving would spark an international outcry against police brutality. This was George Floyd before George Floyd even happened. This was George Floyd before George Floyd even happened. This is a picture of attorney James Bible, who's with the family of Manny Ellis and members of the Tacoma Action Collective. You know, it's just amazing to me. It's amazing to me that stories like this happen, and yet people who defend police officers, who understand what happened here, who understand these officers, these thugs with badges should be behind bars, they'll never mention this again because they understand this was unjust. They understand that murderers just walk free. They get it. They get it, but it's on to the next. It's on to the next. On to the next. This was the first trial of officers charged in the suspect's unaliving since voters approved a state measure in 2018, removing a requirement that prosecutors must prove police acted with malice. So before, you had to prove police acted with malice in order to get any kind of conviction. And there's something else that I want you guys to see, man. Something else that I thought was interesting. This is something that I got from Twitter. Let's see here. This is There we go. I found something on Twitter from CBS. You guys should check this out, man.
There's breaking news from Washington State. 3 Tacoma police officers were found not guilty today in the death of Manuel Ellis, a black man who died in police custody in 2020. The officers were accused of choking and shocking Ellis, holding him face down while he told them he could not breathe. Defense attorneys argued that Ellis died from a lethal amount of drugs in his system and not from excessive force used by the officers. There's breaking news from Washington State. 3 Tacoma police officers.
So that's amazing, right? Because the same people, right? I'm gonna show you what I said about Ed Troyer. Acquitted. Ed Troyer found not guilty of false reporting. So he lied on the black newspaper carrier. He claimed that Cedric Altheimer had threatened to unalive him. And that never happened. That was a lie. And Ed Troyer got away with this. And one of his deputies showed up to restrain Manny Ellis, and he didn't even mention that. He and his sheriff's department was supposed to be investigating what happened to Manny Ellis, but then they were taken off of it when there was a conflict. When there was a conflict of interest, and the conflict the conflict of interest is that the family and lawyers are claiming that it was the police restraint that unalived Ellis, and Sheriff Ed Troyer didn't actually think it was important to mention that one of his sheriff's deputies was there to restrain Ellis. So just saying. So I want to just give you a little bit of a primer of the kind of people you see there in Tacoma, so that you aren't fooled by all the Black Lives Matter flags, all the LGBT flags, all the I'm an ally, I'm a communist, you are an op. I want you to see this, right? I want you to see the facts, the truth of these so-called blue states, right? A jury on Wednesday acquitted Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer on misdemeanor false reporting charges related to his confrontation last year with a black newspaper carrier. Troyer, who is white, had been charged in October of 2021 by the state attorney general's office with 1 count of false reporting and 1 count of making a false or misleading statement to a public servant. A 6-member jury deliberated for about 7 hours before returning the unanimous not guilty verdict on both those counts in Pierce County District Court. The reason why he got acquitted, right? He got acquitted because it was on a technicality. He didn't dial 911. He dialed a non-emergency number, but he did still claim to a public servant that this black person, Cedric Altheimer, had threatened to unalive him, and that never happened. He had been arresting. He had been harassing the black man while the black man was just doing his job. So the same juries acquitted this guy. This guy had a sheriff's deputy restraining Manny Ellis, right? And they also acquitted the 3 officers who took this man's life. Is anyone out there shocked? Anyone? Because I, for one, I'm done being shocked. I'm done being shocked. I mean, at this point, I'm done being shocked. There's nothing shocking about it. This country is a white supremacist country. Period. And anyone who says otherwise is a liar, who I will not respect, who I will not show any respect to, who I won't even talk to. I won't even look at them as a person. Because goodness knows, those police officers didn't look at Manny Ellis as a person.